Hi, you're with Philip Bear, and I'm going to be discussing with you the experience of a trauma-informed holiday season. And in order to get a little bit of a sense of what I'm talking about when I talk about trauma-informed systems approaches, um, we can look at the thing that's written at the top over here, that trauma-informed or non-judgmental systems approaches consider more than just a person's height, their weight, their age, their gender, ethnicity, level of education, and their class when we relate to them. So where's this important? It's really important when we're dealing with children in a classroom, students, when we're dealing with difficult people within our family, in the workplace, or anywhere else where the quality of relationships is likely to be impacted by things that are going on for the individual. What can I say? We're talking about everywhere. There's no place where it isn't helpful to be trauma informed. So why trauma informed? The premise of trauma informed is that while we might look at the superficial aspects of who a person is, what's going on behind the scenes, the thing that's actually determining how any person is interacting within a particular context, has to do with trauma that they've experienced in their lifetime. And not necessarily a car accident, not necessarily a fire or anything tragic in that sense, but as we'll be speaking over the next couple of weeks as I present these, it has a lot more to do with this sense of belonging and with what I call attachment trauma. So this is emotional triggering that occurred as a result of parents who were unavailable when a child was in emotional need. So before we say, oh, okay, well, that wouldn't happen to me, that only happens to bad parents, um, we need to remember that every parent has a range of things that are competing for their attention, including their children. And there were often times in even the best parented households where a parent needed to use the washroom and the child at that point had some need. They went without it. And for them, that experience of being without their parent for 2 or 3 minutes could have been terrifying because when we're young enough, we don't know that the parent's ever going to come back. Right? It seems crazy from an adult perspective because we now have this built-in sense after watching people go to the toilet and no one ever stays in there. We know that they're going to come back. But if you launch yourself back into the time when you were 1 week old, there was no way. You didn't have that database of experience that says mom's going to come back, dad's going to come back. So it was actually a very terrifying experience when they were dealing with another sibling and they couldn't attend to you, when they were in the washroom, when they needed to take the telephone, when they needed to do anything. And in spite of how crazy it sounds, each of us carries the trauma of that disconnection within ourselves. And what shifts the degree to which we experienced that was how often it occurred and how often we cried and cried until we reached a point of futility, that point being the point where it's no longer helping us to cry. So there's no point in crying anymore. There's no point in trying to reach out or use our strategies for re-engaging our parents. So we simply stop. And that is very injurious to the child. Now, even if that occurs fairly frequently, if the parent is able to come up to the child afterwards and recognize, acknowledge, validate what they've been through, that makes a huge difference. It heals some of the wounding that occurs for that child. So when we're engaging with a child who's acting out, with a teacher who's acting out, or a principal, with someone that we're working with someone in our family, in any context, when we're dealing with another person, one of the things that we need to be aware of is whether or not that person has a sense of secure belonging. And what will it take for them to go from feeling secure belonging to a sense of rejection or isolation? Because what we know is that the moment that we go from feeling securely as if we securely belong to a group, to a culture, to whatever it is that we base our identity on, the moment that that connection is threatened and it no longer becomes secure, our pain level goes up, our stress level goes up. And in fact, if anybody is finding that they're stressed in life, one of the places where we can look is to this piece around attachment and secure belonging. So I'm going to put on another slide over here because it's helpful for us to take a look at the kind of things that happen when that secure belonging is not present, and why it's so important to be trauma informed. Because as we're looking at the person in front of us, what we might notice are these symptoms of stress. So it might be getting harder for them to clearly understand what other people are saying. Their nervous systems might be having a tough time sifting out background noise and isolating what's being shared in the conversation. They may be responding to as if the sounds in the room are uncomfortably loud, or finding it increasingly difficult to stop talking, eating, staring, moving, drinking, etc. Are they becoming more avoidant? Is this sense of smell becoming more acute? Now, I'm not going to read through the whole list of these because there's probably over 20 of them on this list. But what we can see is that without sending us an email or a text to say, hey, I've just gone from lack of stress to a stress situation, that person who we're working with or we're caretaking or we care about has suddenly gone from being able to be relaxed and enjoying themselves to being in a more stressed situation. And these are some of the things, ways that their mode of interaction gets impacted. Now, we're not immune from this. When our secure belonging gets impacted, these are symptoms that we'll also experience. And so our ability to participate in social experiences and social environments is going to be impacted. And the more aware we are that this is going on, the more trauma informed we are, the easier it is to accommodate for these things going on and to recognize that the piece that's missing, the piece that was the source of the stress, was the loss of the belonging, that temporary diminishing in the sense of belonging. And so the cure for almost everything in terms of these stressful situations is the equivalent, not necessarily a physical hug, but being aware that that's what the person is missing, that they need a sense of inclusion, that by working on that level of acknowledging that the piece that is causing the stress is a fear of not being a part of, not being worthy of a part of, not being considered a part of. I really hope that this contributes to a much richer holiday experience for you, and look forward to more of these short excursions into our psyche. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining me. It's Philip the Air, and you can see my contact details in the video. Bye bye for now.